Professor Frank Rennie from the University of Highland and Islands, Scotland, Professor of Sustainable Rural Development and Head of Research and Postgraduate Development. Frank, you need to wave your hand so everybody from the back too can see you. From the Open University of the United Kingdom, Professor Martin Weller, Professor of Educational Technology. Give a wave, Martin. University of the West Indies, Dr. Monica Massino, Program Coordinator, Pre-University and Professional Programs, Barbados Campus. Thank you. Ms. Elia Grant Fraser, Instructional Designer, Trinidad and Tobago Campus. University of Mauritius, Mr. Mohammed Santali, Senior Lecturer, Office in Charge, Virtual Center for Innovative Learning Technologies. Thank you. Ms. Dorothy Kushanaik, Lecturer of Visual Communication, also at the Virtual Center for Innovative Learning Technologies. And our two members from the University of the South Pacific, Alanieta Lesuma, thank you, and Louise Vakamovea. Thank you. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce the keynote speaker for this EDULINK-SideCAP dissemination event, Dr. Tony Bates, whom you see there on screen, live from British Columbia in Canada, 2 o'clock Sunday, Canada time. Thank you, Dr. Bates, for availing yourself during this weekend, and we are extremely delighted that you are here with us. Tony Bates is President and CEO of Tony Bates Associates Limited, a private company specializing in consultancy and training in the planning and management of e-learning and distance education. He's a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Advisory Council on Technology and Education. He is currently working on a contract for Alberta on strategic directions for IT in their post-secondary education system. He was part-time research chair in e-learning at the Open University of Catalonia in Barcelona, Spain, until from 2003 to 2006. During 2004 to 2005, he was part-time Cisco chair in e-learning at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, for whom he developed a strategic plan for e-learning. He was also on the academic advisory board of the Volkswagen Auto University Germany from 2003 to 2007. He was Director of Distance Education and Technology at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada, from 1995 to 2003. From 1990 to 1995, he was Executive Director, Research, Strategic Planning, and Information Technology at the Open Learning Agency of British Columbia. Prior to that, he was Professor of Educational Media Research at the British Open University, where he worked for 20 years as one of the founding members of staff. He is the author of 9 books, including Managing Technological Change, Strategies for College and University Leaders, and with Gary Poole, Effective Teaching with Technology in Higher Education. His latest book is Technology, E-Learning, and Distance Education, published in April 2005. He has worked as a consultant in over 40 countries. Clients include the World Bank, OECD, UNESCO, National Ministries of Education, and several U.S. state higher education commissions. Dr. Bates, it is a pleasure to have you here with us, delivering the keynote address through video conferencing. And on behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University of the South Pacific, Professor Rajesh Chandra, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Esther Williams, the partners in this EDULINK-SideCAP event, and members of the Diplomatic Corps, and invited guests. We look forward to hearing from you. We thank you once again, and let me ask the members here today to welcome you with a round of applause. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be talking to you by video conference. I'd like to thank University of British Columbia particularly for making this possible, and particularly Mark Zuberbühler. I have to tell you that it was with great regret that I decided not to come to Fiji and do this in person. You have to understand that it's February in Vancouver, it's wet and cold, and I'd much sooner be in Fiji. Whenever I've been, I've always had a wonderfully warm welcome. So, on the other hand, if you're a distance educator, as they say, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So at least we should demonstrate distance education and save some very valuable greenhouse gas emissions on the air flight from Vancouver to Fiji, which would have had to gone through New Zealand, incidentally. So I'm feeling morally very smug at the moment in doing this. I want to talk about new tools and new designs for distance education, and particularly in the light of what's happening with open content and with new technologies. A great number of changes are happening at the moment in the technology. Thanks. So, for an overview, I want to have a very brief look at current models of distance education. I'm going to argue that we, once again, need to change our models. We have a long history in distance education of change and development, and I think we're about to go through another period of change. And I want to focus particularly on new learning outcomes as a reason for the change in our methods of doing distance education, and new technology as reasons for change. Then I want to talk about what the implications of that for new designs of distance education, particularly around the area of open content, and then some very brief conclusions at the end. So that's the overview. At the moment, we have James Taylor, I think, talked about 5 generations of distance education. I think it's a bit more complex than that. But we've had primarily print and broadcast-based distance education, which is still practiced in many countries around the world, particularly where there's difficulties of access to the internet and so on. And it's still a valuable model. It's still very cost-effective, particularly in developing countries with little access otherwise to post-secondary education. But more recently, we've moved to online, asynchronous, text-based distance education using learning management systems, and also at the same time we've seen an increase in web-based synchronous conferencing, something like this but over the web, and particularly with individuals at home using technologies such as Illuminate and Adobe Connect, which allows audio plus slides, somewhat similar to this presentation, into people's homes. And then I think we're going to go into another model soon, and I'll explain what that model is. Now, I'm going to make a point here about open content. If I was doing this lecture and I knew that it was going to be used as open content, I would stop at this point, because I think my introduction is long enough. I would do this as a video clip, and then I'd ask students to do an activity. And here's the activity that I would ask them to do. So with the video, I would ask them to do the following activity. Read articles on different models of distance education, write down the strengths and weaknesses of different models, and then go on to the next video clip, which is the next bit that I'm going to do about why change. So immediately, you should be thinking about the design of what you're doing if you want it to be used as open content. It immediately changes the way you think of what might otherwise be a straightforward lecture, for instance. I'm not even going to argue that a lecture is the best way to do open content, but if you are going to do a lecture, then it's much better to split it up into small segments than to have 50 minutes of a talking head.